Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is the Unspoiled Book Club, covering Cackle by Rachel Harrison. In this episode, I guested with the wonderful gentleman from Overdue once again for spooky season. And this book was one that I actually had already read and selected for us to talk about together. We shall see how that goes. Welcome to Unspoiled.
Ooh, witchy woman, see how high she flies. Ooh, witchy woman, she got the moon in her eye.
How do you guys, how do you feel about spiders?
Listen, we should talk about that up front because some people do not like spiders.
It's true, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love spiders, but I recognize their role as like a utility player in the the food chain, like the wider ecosystem. And I've come to an uneasy truce with the spiders, mostly.
I'm actually kind of a fan. Not to say that I'm like delighted when I see one
You
in my
like their
house.
early work, you know, like you were listening to
I
spiders.
like spiders before it was cool to like spiders.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I hate insects mostly. And so I see us as being on the same side. It's just its presence is probably doing me many favors that I don't know about. It's preventing me from running into a lot more insects than I would be otherwise, especially outside living in Texas. We get moths that are the size of like hummingbirds.
Oh, yeah.
And they freak me out so I have this like terror of them getting caught in my hair, which has actually happened. And once they flew into my lips and just barely my mouth closed in time. Precisely. So for me, I'll take a spider any day. Like, yeah. We're all right. Me and spiders and possums also. Possums
are cool.
You know, I just had to get rid of a bunch of groundhogs out of my yard, and I'll say possums don't bother me that much. They mostly keep to their own devices and do their stuff at night, and we just don't cross paths that much.
What I learned when there was a possum, we're going to talk about Cackle by Rachel Harrison and all the spiders that are in that book in just a second.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I will say, I think it was 2020, we had a possum that would occasionally spent like 4 or 5 days showing up in our backyard, and it would always sit on the same fence post at like 11 p.m.
He was like Norm.
And then he would move, and then he moved on. And we read about, like, apparently, like, especially like in the city, like possums will just like roll up, you know, kind of eat what's there for a while, and then they just go on. They're not like trying to live in a spot for a long time. They're renters. They're not trying to own.
Man.
Yeah.
The people at Critter Control, and I can vouch for them, at least in my zip code.
In your hog zone, yeah.
In my hog zone, yes, exactly. They were like, yeah, we have to drive the groundhogs 15 or 20 miles away from here so they can't find their way back.
Wow.
Groundhogs really want to live at your house if they live in your house.
They have like a way better sense of direction than me. You could drop me 3 blocks from where I live and I'd probably be like, ooh.
Oh no. Well, I guess this is just my life now. Okay.
Exactly.
I wonder if that means that's like how far they're willing to just like roam, you know, like because I guess they might have good enough wayfinding to just be like, oh yeah,
Maybe.
I've smelled that before.
They've got a 15-mile commute and they've gotten to know the area.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I like it.
It's like the 15-minute city. Anyway, we're going to talk about this book that is a cozy horror novel or a spooky women's fiction novel or a tale of friendship and spiders. There are a lot of spiders in this book.
Tale of Friendship and Spiders is a real good title. We should have gone with that.
Well, George R.R. Martin is not writing anything new these days. Yeah.
Don't get me started on that.
Just true trigger warning up top. There are so many spiders in this book that we are going to have to talk about many of them. And if that is a thing for you, just pretend we're saying a different word or we'll see you next time. Like I know it's bad for people.
To be fair, this is mostly a note for our our helper Megan, who listens to all the episodes and does a bunch of social media and stuff.
Yes.
Who really hates spiders and is still going to have to do all that stuff for this episode. Sorry, Megan.
Well, Megan,
we didn't
just
know about the
for
spiders.
your information, one of the spiders does wear a tiny like tuxedo and top hat
And like a
or
necktie.
something. So yeah, so it's adorable? Question
Yeah,
mark?
there's a real like Michigan J Frog spider in this book
True.
toward the end.
So, Natasha, you're the one who brought this book to us. Where did it come from?
I go through a lot of audiobooks. For somebody who does podcasting, I don't really listen to many. You guys and like one other show are the ones that I tend to listen to. And that other one is Snapped, Women Who Kill. So, real weird sort of playlist I've got going on.
Great company.
But I really go through audiobooks so fast, and it's something that I keep an eye out for when people recommend a book and especially mention the narrator being pretty decent. And I listened to this just on my own time, and I just thought it was kind of delightful and like fun in a really lighthearted way. It's funny to me that it's at all called like a thriller or horror because it really isn't to me. There's some parts that are vaguely spooky, but it's mild. And I will say on the reread, it's a little frustrating because our main character really is so annoying for a very long time. So like I kind of forgot about that part and focused on how satisfying the conclusion is. And
Interesting.
I stand by that, but I also have to say probably what frustrates me so much about her is how familiar she feels. Like there are very shades of me in her that I don't like to look at. So that's part of it. But it's always the way when you have somebody who like goes through a real change and they end up somewhere that's like much more satisfying. Going back and reading when they were pitiful and sad is always kind of hard. So, but that's just me.
That's why I don't read my live journal from high school.
I think I deleted
mine too.
I think I deleted mine.
You guys have got me searching in this Googles for your live journals. I hope you're ready. About to get some weird comment alert emails.
Oh no.
I had pretty much exactly the same reaction to the protagonist, and the ending did salvage her a lot for me because I always have trouble when somebody is like kind of annoying or frustrating, or to pick a word with a lot of baggage, unlikable, because sometimes you can tell that they're supposed to be that way and it's serving a narrative purpose, and sometimes it's not clear whether the author likes this person and thinks that they're annoying or thinks that they're really awesome. But by the end, it becomes, I think the narrative does come around to, you're kind of supposed to find her annoying or frustrating because she's still finding herself. And it does pay off, but it is still, you still have to read 80% of the book.
Yeah.
Before you really get to her confronting that frustrating stuff about herself and acknowledging it and changing it. So it is a long walk. You do get somewhere eventually, but it's a long walk.
Yeah.
For sure. Harrison's not someone that I had ever heard of before we embarked on this adventure. This is her second novel. She's written
came out in 2021.
In October. Did it release in October?
Yeah.
That was a smart idea.
Yeah, in October.
Oh, good for her.
Yes. And her newest one is called Black Sheep. It's as we record this, is not out yet, but as you're listening to it, it will have come out a month ago. It's coming out this month in September.
Her first novel, published in 2020, The Return, was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award for Superior Achievement in a First Novel. And then
now I want to read it.
That one, it was, as I was kind of reading different reviews of this and just getting info on her work, people were praising that one. There's Such Sharp Teeth, which comes after Cackle. There's a short story collection called Bad Dolls that was reviewed briefly, like blurbed in the Times by Daniel Trussoni, who said, Rachel Harrison's feminist horror novels are some of the most original and entertaining out there, and her collection of stories, Bad Dolls, is right up there with her longer works, filled with women on the cusp of change, a bad breakup, sexual discovery, and extreme diet. They explore the dark side of being female in the 21st century. Again, I feel like whatever work she's done in her other novels that is way more horror than this one creates some like odd expectations for this book that I'm glad I didn't really have going in.
Same. I just heard about it, and then it wasn't until after that I saw it was categorized under horror in some places, and I was genuinely startled. So yeah, I really like the thing about this book that gets to me is how I can understand who she is so much, the main character, and be so frustrated with her, but also see myself in the other like larger than life characters, the other women that she runs into. And it's so easy to try and pretend you don't have any of Annie in you at all, and that you're just these like cool women. But if you like look at your actual, I think I'm really curious actually, as men, what your experience is regarding your identity and romantic relationships.
First, thank you finally for asking for the male
I
perspective.
thought no one would ever ask us.
It's just a sort of thing because, like, honestly, you laugh, but like
No one
men
talks about it. Yeah.
and their expectations of romantic relationships, it's often treated as kind of a joke because the worst of you want a maid they can fuck. Like the worst of you. And those sad, terrible men get very much attention, which is a shame. But then there are reasonable men out there who I don't feel like y'all talk much about your feelings regarding this sort of thing and what you were raised, like what kind of expectations were around you from your family and from your friends.
That is a great question.
As an adolescent into even like my 20s, I always had I had a tough time talking with my parents about it because the tone when I was younger and I was ever in the presence of like a girl or something was always like a light teasing sort of thing. Like, ooh, Andrew has a girlfriend. And it made me like absolutely like mortified to actually bring that to any of them. And it's a thing that I can tell that I'm still like processing in some ways when I'm like talking to them and trying to tell them about life events. So that's a little younger than the character in this book. Craig, did you want to go now? And then we'll keep talking.
Like, what do I want to say about this? This is a good question. So
yeah, it's great.
Before we started recording, Natasha, I mentioned briefly, like, I grew up mostly with just my mom and two older sisters. And so, like, especially as I became, when you hit like mid-teens and you're like, I think I know who the person I am is. And you're like, when you look back in your memory, the 13 or 14-year-old you is still basically the you are now. And that's just, it's a lie, but it's a trick your brain plays. I've basically been that person for 20 years. No comment, whatever. But like, I don't have a sense of what a male heterosexual, I only have the negative of like, well, I don't do that. And I'm not going to be that person.
I will say the archetype that completely ruined like young Andrew at doing this is the one where it's like, okay, if you like someone and they just want to be friends with you, but you still really like them, if you just be friends with them hard enough and you be there all the time and you do everything they want, eventually they'll turn around one day and realize that they love you and have loved you all along, and you'll finally get what you're looking for.
I had some very good female friends in high school who were very patient with me, and they were wonderful.
Wow, that was one sentence, but I really got a picture. I know exactly what was going on. Okay,
and then kind of moving into like actually being an adult, I feel like whatever version of I became as a partner is actually way more informed by my mom in terms of like being a caretaker and, because my mom cared for my grandmother while she was living with us until she passed away while I was a kid. And so like that is what an adult in the house does in any sort of relationship, which is not it does not map to like the friendly but goofy dads on sitcom television. It does not map to like an easy male figure in my life that I just didn't have. So to your like where this question comes from relative to this book, it's interesting to read a character who is approaching 30 or she's just turning 30 at the beginning of the book, and she's like, I've been in this relationship through my entire 20s, and like I don't know what my adult persona is because I'm realizing that I don't think I had one.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you know,
Yeah.
that's not an alien experience to me because like I didn't. There's a lot of things in my life that didn't really settle until my late 20s. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like, for a lot of us, we use relationships as a way to explore who we are, hopefully, but it is really easy to fall into the trap of making that who you are.
Yeah.
And whoever you're with, you take on the personality of the like their interests become your interests. And I have a sort of, so like so many women, I was really, it was embossed upon my brain that having a romantic relationship was the ultimate goal. Getting married, having kids, the ultimate goal. But that along the way, you should aim to ensnare the hearts of as many men as possible to prove your like triumph, and that anyone who wound up with you was like really achieving something because they were choosing a woman who had options. And I really, really based so much of who I was around the validation that I got from men. And there was a piece of advice that I saw circulating on social media a while back. It was like a screenshot from a Tumblr post, and a woman was saying, a lot of people ask me what advice I would give to young women, and people laugh when I say this, but I'm not kidding. Stop caring about men. Stop investing your time in relationships. Stop worrying about their opinion of you. Do what you want, what you like, and do not make any space for them right now, because it is such a waste of time looking back at all like, and as much as that feels extreme, there's a part of me that really does look at my behavior and my priorities and realizes how many times I could have explored things I was interested in and didn't because the guy that I was with wasn't interested, or that would require me to move somewhere that they didn't want to move. Meanwhile, I uprooted my life in Connecticut and moved to Philadelphia for my husband at the time. No questions asked. And there are a lot of things like that where women are simply expected to make changes to our lives in favor of what the man wants. And it's so embedded that it's like, no, I don't even think of it until I look back with that kind of lens on, and suddenly I can discover it everywhere in so many of the choices that I made. And that's not to say that there wasn't good that came out of that and I didn't learn things, but it is such a shame how much the prism of what will men think, what do men like, was the first, like, you know, lens that I looked through anytime I did anything, even down to like what lipstick I chose for the day, things like that.
And you're talking about this thing also happening at a, you know, for women at a younger age, when like if you're also dating men of a similar age, like we are not ready to treat any of this seriously. We do not have the skill set. Most of us have not fully developed. We have not emerged from our pupa state. Like we are just messes, way more than anyone is like commonly saying, you know, like among men, I think. Right. And so like, yeah, just don't worry about us. We're not ready for it.
Yeah.
Well, I think the thing that I valued the most, I think, about me and Susanna's relationship is like we're both really we have a lot of shared interests. I think our tastes in a lot of things are the same, which creates just a lot of overlap, like naturally. Just thinking about like movies or TV shows or even just like decorating decisions, like it's stuff that it's pretty easy to come to a consensus.
Shared
on.
aesthetic values goes a long way. Yep.
It truly does.
But in those areas where we don't have shared interests, like we are very good at like creating space for the other person to go off and do other stuff. Like I don't have to go see musicals very often, and she doesn't need to be any more interested in like video games than she has to. Like it works well. And I think when you are younger, both your hormones and like all of pop culture are telling you, like when you are in love, you need to be obsessed with this person all the time. You can never ever want to be apart. Like you when you are apart, you have to be pining for each other all the time. Like just like your young brain and heart are not equipped to create the distance for you both to exist as individual people. And I think that makes a lot of stuff harder too. Like the thing with Annie in this book that she's having so much trouble with is for so many years, she was kind of defined by her relationship with this guy who dumps her. Mm-hmm. And it takes her a while to kind of figure out who she is, like independently of him, and like move past him. And that's most of what the journey of the book is. Yeah. And yeah. That part resonated with me, I think.
Yeah. The book starts with her out on the town for her birthday. And I say out on the town in a way that makes it sound fun, but Annie does not make fun. And she is with a coworker, because she's a teacher, who is a bright, fun, lively person. And even Annie herself recognizes by the end of the night, this is somebody that she could have had a really great friendship with. But she invested all her time in Sam and just didn't go out when she was invited to like Margarita Tuesday. She was talking about later on, because the new school she moves
invites.
to.
Yeah.
She expects the same sort of camaraderie and takes those invites for granted, but she admits she never actually went to those events. It was really rare. And again, a thing that I would do, I often would sort of look back and be like, I had a really hard time making friends. And I'm like realizing as I get older, I didn't value my friendships very much. I valued my romantic relationships above friendships most of the time. And I put more energy into those. And it shook out the way that it shook out. And, you know, you get what you put in a lot of the time, not always. But her momentary kind of what could have been with this woman is the beginning of what you want to be like a quicker realization. I think, you know, she's like on the track and it just takes a little longer than you feel like it really should.
Yeah, the book really takes it really waits until the very end of the book for her to like really even attempt an aha moment. And I think that I did not share the same like base level frustration with her as I was reading it, but that's just probably me just being like, brain take in the book and then we'll think about it later.
You are way slower to be like, man, this character is really, really grinding my gears than I am. Like I'll come into Slack and be like, okay, man, this is how far I am in the book. And this is how I feel about the character right now. And I just need to like mention it for a sec so I can map my journey.
And I am just
we've recorded episodes, including recently, where like Craig realized that he didn't like the book, like as we were talking about.
I have had that happen too. I am very opinionated pretty quickly, but sometimes it takes a while for all those opinions to crystallize into a unified, oh, I didn't like this. I'll think it's like a lot of disparate little, well, this could be improved and that wasn't so great. And then once I like lay it all out, I'm like, oh, that's mostly in the cons column.
Yeah.
I have liked a book more through talking about it. It's rare that I don't already know that I don't like something that I don't like coming into the recording.
Yeah, I'm probably almost exactly the opposite. I'm usually starting at a place where it's like, yeah, that's the book. And then if I can't rebuild what I thought was a positive experience talking through it, well, then I get sad. Annie, so we're like, okay, we're talking about this book. We're talking about Cackle by Rachel Harrison, right? She is a teacher, as you said. She is going to change jobs. She's turning 30. She's very sad to be turning 30 because she also just broke up with Sam, or Sam broke up with her. We're going to find out more about that. And I just was like, yeah, she's a mess. She's a mess, and she's gonna.
This is a real like solar return for those of you who are into astrology. Right around 30, that's the time where shit starts to hit the fan a little bit, and you step back from your life and look at it and go, "Is this it? Really? That? I don't know about this." I got divorced at 30 and moved to Texas and changed everything about my life. And, just saying that I did jump directly from that marriage into the relationship with my now husband, Owen. And this is where I identify with Annie. And looking back, I probably should have taken some time to establish myself. But there's also, let's be real, the economic aspect of trying to live on your own income.
On your
extremely
and
fair,
that is mentioned
Yeah.
in this book, right? Is like one of the things she mentions is that like she cannot live in Manhattan or they're not in like Brooklyn.
They're in New York.
They're in New
Like
York.
New York City.
New York City.
Yeah, like it doesn't say like if she's actually talking about like Jersey City or,
No,
if
or
it's just, like,
Hoboken,
if there's
yeah.
some kind of mitigating factor. But yeah,
but
she's
she
in
can't
New York.
afford to live there on her own on her teacher's salary, and Sam's going to keep the apartment that they live in because he does
Right.
whatever.
And so that's why she needs to move up to like haunted Stars Hollow to start a new life.
Yeah, what is it called? It's not Astor.
Yeah, Rowan.
Rowan, because Astor is where she winds up teaching. But
Yeah,
she-
that's the like big box town next to Rowan. Rowan's
Yes.
the picturesque, the hidden jewel,
Yes.
and Astor is like where you go to get to your Target and Walmart, and then go
Rowan
home to
is
your
the-
lovely Rowan.
Rowan is Meg Ryan's bookstore in You've Got Mail, and Astor is Tom Hanks's bookstore in You've
Yes.
Got Mail.
yeah, exactly.
That's relatable, right? Like that's still
That's a
people
movie
still know
people
about
like.
that
It's
one.
a good movie. A surprisingly good performance by Dave Chappelle, who I don't want to see in anything else anymore.
Oh my God, that's right.
It's a
Forgot
good
that he was in that.
performance.
I forgot.
Is he like
about
Tom Hanks's friend or
Yeah.
something?
Yeah, the
Okay,
funny
wow,
black
okay.
friend. Yep.
Anyway, I mean the optics, yeah, but
No.
but anyway, so the first like few scenes of the book, right, are like her on this birthday adventure with Nadia, and she's like, I don't like you. I think that read is really good. I don't think I clocked it in the moment of just like how much she could have connected with Nadia had she been an independent person. And then a little bit of the portrait of where her and Sam are. The little like snippet that really stood out to me was when she describes the sleeping arrangement they've settled on, where they're like, because they're still living together for a little bit before she moves, they like alternate days between the futon and the real bed. And it's like he has set up the futon for her since she was out. And
This
it's
is
like,
again, as somebody going through a divorce, like it's not something I see represented a lot in various media, the living arrangements where you have broken up but you still share a space, and what do you do? And it can be so awkward and strange. And we had been planning for me to like move into my recording room basically and sleep in there.
Oh,
and
boy.
it just didn't wind up like we split a lot faster than that. But the concept of this and the fact that she later thinks about how he dumped her but then wanted her to sleep on the futon, and I guess if he's keeping the apartment, it feels like it makes sense to him, but there is sort of an insult to injury here. Just like, let me have the bed for the couple of weeks before I find my own place, man. God.
Yeah, like it is a long time before I think. So Annie spends a lot of time sort of pining for Sam and like lamenting the passing of their relationship. I didn't get around to actively not liking him until like later when he comes to see her and is
Agreed.
clearly a jerk. I'm sure that reads differently to a lot of women, especially who maybe have like recognized some like early danger signs with Annie and Sam's relationship.
yeah.
But yeah, like in retrospect, he kind of he's like at the end of the book makes it textual that he sucks, but there's a lot of like subtext before that.
I think
That thinking back on my realize, yes, he did suck.
my experience
And the
reading it,
futon situation is one of those moments.
yeah, my read on it as the book was going, Andrew, was similar, was that, like, this is a bad breakup. It's a bad, crappy breakup. Yeah, I didn't think of either of them as particularly to blame. I did, like, note the fact that, like, he initiated things and then kind of let her internalize that, like, she was also part of that decision, even though she clearly wasn't. But it wasn't a breakup of, like, malignant behavior, or, like, he wasn't mean to her. There is the stuff that comes out later of the, like, whether or not he was, like, really treating her as a partner in the relationship, or what his expectations of her were. But that's not part of the first half, right? That's not until she starts actually thinking about it. So,
yeah, and you do have that moment of, like, boy, he did start dating somebody else awful fast.
That's also true. The book does not explore whether or not he was already dating that person, which was what I was wondering about. But
I think it's strongly. You are left to infer it, I think.
Yeah, there's a moment where he's telling her that he's going to the bar, and he says
people.
with coworkers, and she's like, "But you never used to do that." And he's like, "Well, I used to not be able to because I had to be home." And there's a real vibe to me of, like, there was a girl that I would have gone and had drinks with, and I have a little bit of a flirt going on, and now I actually am free to pursue that. So whether he was, like, seeing somebody already, I think he was interested, and that was part of the motivation.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's also a difference in, like, being a teacher. I feel like you have less exposure to other adults for long periods with that type of job. So it might be easier for someone. I don't even remember what he did for work, but it seems like he's around grownups and, you know, is able to engage in a little bit of flirtation in a way that Annie didn't seem to have with her job.
I mean, he can live in a 1-bedroom apartment in New York by himself. So probably, like, finance or something, like finance adjacent.
I really don't. Yeah, I don't think the book ever says. I think it just says, like, colleagues or work.
Not
or something.
Important, and it's probably not interesting.
But
but yeah, like, even as late as the, like, him dating somebody else thing, it's like, okay, there's, like, plausible deniability here. People grow apart. There's, like, no good way to break that kind of relationship apart when it's, like, an asymmetric,
a decade-long
like,
relationship.
Apart. Yeah. Like, there's just, you know, nobody handles that super gracefully. I'm willing to, like, cut him a little slack on his behavior, but
the specific being that, like, and she says, she's like, I don't remember how marriage came up, but he said, he's like, I'm not feeling the way I think I should feel about it, which is, like, both honest, which is a good thing. But the thing that, like, is then a problem through the rest of the book is, like, he's still got a foot in their relationship.
Yeah.
Which is, like, okay, it may be understandable that she would still have a foot in their relationship because she didn't necessarily want to end things, but he needed to have, like, put up a clearer break.
Yeah, there's really a sense for me, like, in retrospect, of him saying, like, I think we really should be friends. I want you in my life. And I'm not even sure if he would have been aware of this, but he's making his escape plan. Like, he is going to keep her in the wings because he knows she doesn't want to split. And that way, if things don't go the way he thought or wanted, he can just summon her back. And, you know, if things had gone differently, that probably would have worked out for him. And it's like, what I like is, you know, we're in her head the whole time. So every time she's thinking about him, she's thinking about cute moments they had together, lovely banter that they used to have.
I like their banter. I think it is, like, earned that they have, like, a rapport, and they have a distinct sense of humor. Like, it does feel like a thing she would cherish and want to keep in her life.
And it makes sense too. A lot of what she's feeling when she talks to him is just the, like, enjoying talking to somebody who knows her so well.
Yeah,
and
just, like, shared history.
Yeah, and it's like, again, if you had fostered any actual friendships, Annie, you wouldn't need just him for that feeling of familiarity. You would have friends you could reach out to. And, you know, there's a couple times where Nadia texts her, but she is never the one to initiate that. Nadia always texts her. She does not put the effort out. And yet constantly is so upset about how alone she is. But it's like the idea of a friendship making her less alone is not considered. She doesn't see that as...
It takes her a really long time to get there.
It's only a romantic relationship in which she would be not alone. And it's such a shame because I really, really understand it. And I'm at a point in my life where I am very happy with where I am. But if something were to happen and Owen and I were to split up, I will tell you what, kids, not again. I'm not doing it. I am staying single and I am just going to figure it out because it is a lot of time and energy. And if you have other shit you feel like doing, you know, you've got a short life. And there's a short window where you're like able-bodied and cogent enough to get that stuff done. So I really, the older I get, the more I feel very Sophie-ish. And even though Sophie isn't awesome with the way she handles a
we're
lot
gonna
of
talk
stuff.
about Sophie in a
Can't wait to talk.
second.
But I can see what's going on where she's getting so impatient because she sees what's going on. She knows where Annie is stuck. And she's doing that thing that like overbearing parents do, where they aren't letting you learn the lesson. They're trying to like make you just do what they want instead of
They've already learned the
allowing
lesson
you.
and they want you on the other side of it.
Exactly. And unfortunately, like that's what life is watching people you love who haven't gone through things make the mistake and go through it and just having to sit back and let them do that.
Yeah.
Which sucks. And when you like somebody, you don't want them to. And you know it's avoidable. Like that's the worst part. It's like it doesn't have to be this way though. But like it kind of does. It kind of does have to be that way.
You just gotta let people touch the stove burner sometimes. Like it's the only way.
Yep.
So we haven't mentioned yet. So okay,
Yes.
Annie moves to. I keep wanting to call it any name but the name that it
Rowan?
is, the
Rowan?
town.
Is it still
It's
in New
Rowan.
York or is
It's
it
not-
in a different state?
It's in upstate New York. I
Okay.
think.
Okay.
It's not Stars Hollow. It's not Forks. It's Rowan.
Yeah.
She moves up to Rowan. And she is kind of like settling in. The apartment's furnished. There are a bunch of spiders in it, which she is way chiller about than I would have been.
Yeah,
Fine,
I was
whatever.
thinking that was going to be a bigger problem.
I
And she's
flagged
just like,
the
oh,
moment
geez.
where she literally like saves a spider, and I was like, this is like a Pixar save the cat moment where like we know a person is a good person because they spare a weaker creature, and she's like, spider, I will save you.
Yeah,
And then the spiders in the rest of the book show up, and I was like, oh no, it's just a
Even
spider
if I
thing.
saved the first spider, by the time I'm seeing the third, like progressively larger spider in the first hour of like moving into a new home, I'm like, all right, what's the Terminix number out here? Like, can I get someone to come out and do something about it?
Yeah, I would definitely be getting in touch with my landlord and just like, hey, we've got a little bit of an issue down
Got
here.
some spiders.
So
Have you known about this? But she has moved in. She is kind of getting settled. She goes into the liquor store to get a bottle of wine because she's going to start getting white lady drunk every night because she is
'Cause school is
30
hard and she doesn't have
sad
friends.
and single.
Yeah.
Yes. And she meets this woman, this like ageless, beautiful woman who she's instantly drawn to, and it's not necessarily like romantic or like a horny thing. It's just like I am drawn to this person. I want to be around them all the time. How can I get to know more about this person? And this is Sophie, who's the other big like presence in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Sophie is she's just, you know, the woman you want to be. Flawless hair and skin, self-possessed, dressed to the nines, and for no reason. And the reason is because she would like to be, period. And I want so much to be Sophie right now in my life. Like, especially those of you who work from home probably can relate. There are days where you're like, why dress?
Yeah.
But why
Why
though?
clothes?
Why shower? Nobody knows. Who cares? And just the sheer effort that she puts, she makes all of her own dresses, we wind up finding out.
Yep.
And of course, she has the time. So I'm not going to try and compare myself too much. I'm just saying I have a closet of lovely dresses right behind me. And when is the last time that I just put one on for being home?
For no reason.
Yeah.
When is the last time that I made a full like meal instead of girl dinner when I know Owen isn't going to be home. You know, even like tonight making this cocktail that I made, I almost just poured it into like a double walled stainless steel cup to keep it cold. And then I was like, I have these gorgeous crystal goblets. Oh my God, just put it in the pretty thing that you like to look at. Just have a nice time.
Yeah.
But it's just so, I'm bent on practicality so often and doing the easiest thing. Also, capitalism kills your soul, so there's lack of
Sophie
energy in
exists
there.
outside
There's
of capitalism.
Yeah.
That cup thing is so important. Like, you could just pour every drink into the big 64-ounce plastic cup that you got from the gas station.
Yeah.
Where you've put it through the dishwasher so many times that the gas station logo is starting to fade
Yeah,
off.
because
the
at that
front
point it
of
doesn't even remind you any. It's not even a commemorative movie cup anymore. The dishwasher's taking your Batman and Robin logo away. Like,
This is
But
really painting a picture. You
sometimes-
guys are
Oh, yeah,
evocative
yeah,
this
yeah.
evening. I like it.
Sometimes it's nice to put a drink in the glass where the beer can says, you should put it in this glass, maybe.
yeah,
You know?
we have like glasses that are meant for IPAs because I don't know why they're meant for India Pale Ales, but they're like kind of like a tulipy beer
Tulip
glass,
shape.
right?
Yeah.
And Laura,
Some of
Frisbee-
this, I think, is big cup.
Yeah,
Just like trying to make us
marketing
all
different
buy more cups, you know?
but it's like it's like a curvy lady glass, right? It's got.
I was
like
thinking when you said big cup, immediately my mind goes to bras, and I
Yeah.
was just like, I'm not going to say that. But then curvy ladies came up, and I'm like, maybe big cup is got its finger in two pies.
It was meant to be, yeah.
But yeah, so Annie isn't even at that point in her life, but she's met this impressive, like, make you just stand still and like take her in woman in this liquor store. And now what she's like, meet me at the farmer's market on Saturday. I'm not going to tell you a time. Just show up and we'll hang out. We'll have coffee.
Yeah.
Like you do.
She does that, and everybody in town is clearly like very weirdly subservient to this woman.
Yeah, it's very strange.
And this is the thing. The thing that bothered me about Annie is like part of it is the sad sack stuff, but I think by itself the sad sack stuff I can get because like she's earned that from the the relationship she just broke up. She's in a new place. Like there's a lot to be sad sacking about. The sort of passivity with which she floats into this relationship with Sophie, who also is frequently like super condescending and terrible to her. That's what really bothered me. And again, like by the end, you get around to them being like more equal and Annie like asserting herself. But there's this one section where she's gone over to Sophie's house. It's clear something creepy's going on with Sophie. Like she's some kind of creepo. It's not clear what immediately, but like she's creepy because she lives in the woods in a big scary castle.
Yeah.
And she has like next to a graveyard. Like it's meant to evoke some
And I do want to
creepiness.
shout out a little like thing that Harrison does where like Sophie will just, and this is all before you know what Sophie's deal is. There's like a lot of little notes of Sophie all of a sudden just has something in her hand. Like all of a sudden she's just like got the thing she needs. And there's like always a little blip of Annie being like, and then she just manifested a thing. And in one reading it's just somebody who's prepared or elegant or smooth, and or it's the spooky reading, and of course it's kind of both. But yeah, you're getting those little drips and drabs of her having a deal, Andrew.
So Annie goes to her house and gets like her foot mangled by a ghost. Like there are ghosts in this house, and there's like bad stuff, kind of creepy bad stuff.
That's like her
happening.
second visit to the house. I
Yeah,
think, in the pool.
it's a
I'm
while
a
later.
Yeah, that's
I'm
fine.
lighting
That's
some
fine.
stuff,
I'm just
but
checking. Yeah.
she like visits the house. It's clearly haunted. She asks Sophie, "Are there ghosts in your house?" And Sophie's like, "No, there's no ghosts in my house. What are you talking about?" And like Sophie has been like just does not answer direct questions about what her deal is, but Annie is like, Sophie said this place isn't haunted, and she's been nothing but honest with me so far. So I shake it off. Must be my imagination. And it's at that point where I'm sort of yelling at the characters in the book a little bit. Like, could you just be a tiny bit more aware of your surroundings?
Yep.
Like that is the vibe that frustrates me, because she does not really see anything super malevolent in Sophie's behavior again until that very end when she's also like reevaluating her relationship with Sam. And I guess if you got her to that emotional like turning point, that pivot point faster, the book would just be a lot shorter. And
guess,
maybe that's not what Harrison or her publisher wanted, but it did seem like it just took too long to get where it was going.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be that she is so desperate for anybody to approve of her and want to be around her that she's willing to overlook a lot. And it's just her doing that yet again with Sophie. And eventually she does put her foot down. And the thing that makes Sophie smile and be proud of her is her being like, don't call me pet, because she keeps saying that. But it really is a lot of her. There's a real passivity to Annie in general. And that's sort of the whole deal with her, is that her personality has depended on her being compliant with whomever it is that's around her. They are always going to be the one with the power, because she has this desperate need to be liked and to be validated, and has a lot harsher of an opinion of herself than the people around her seem to. She's always looking and thinking like, somebody's going to make fun of me for this and that, which is made worse by the fact that she teaches teenagers who are, if you're like Annie in personality, may I recommend literally any other line of work?
Yeah,
You cannot handle this.
That she wound, and she was teaching in New York. At one point she is like, I taught in the city. I can handle this.
She's
and
real
she
Brita.
can, but it is like wild that she is like, well, let me get in front of teenagers every day, because I clearly have a lot of self-confidence. And I can handle
let me immerse myself in this physical room full of like the equivalent of internet commenters, and just they can criticize all the stuff about me that I hate.
Where she is like, my last name is Crane, and I know I look like a bird, but let me get in front of teenagers, and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, this is the sort of thing, like, if you're going to be doing this, you need to come up with some things locked and loaded, ready to like fire out there and handle it, because she gets caught real off guard. And I'm just going to put it down to her being rattled in general and not really thinking ahead. But there does eventually come, I want to call it a satisfying moment, but it's so freaky that I'm like, is it? There's a kid who's been mocking her constantly. And when she's talking to Sophie about what assholes these kids are, Sophie says, want me to curse them for you. And at the time, Annie is not putting it together that this is a real offer, and says, sure. And this kid is doing bird chirps and caws, and suddenly starts choking like he's got a hairball, and he coughs up a whole spider she describes as the size of a baby's fist, which is a real
Pretty awful.
Sure. And like it falls, nobody's sure what it is. It just looks black, and then all of a sudden its legs like extend out, and it gets up, and it's alive and walks away.
I like the bit where the kids are like, we should kill it, and Annie's like, no. A kid just puked it up. I did in 5th grade, a kid in my English class, in the middle of reading a chapter from Around the World in 80 Days. It was Around the World in 80 Days or something about balloons. I don't remember. Anyway, he just did what this kid did. It wasn't a spider, but he did just in the middle of reading a book, like put his palms down on the desk, push back, and just projectile vomited. And it did break the entire class. God. It was unreal. It was so wild to read the scene, because I was like, Harrison, were you there? Are you someone I don't know was in my 5th grade English class? But it is like really awful. And Annie's like, I don't know, it's pretty bad. I mean, she cleans it up because she's like, I don't want the janitors
There's so
to
much
do it.
detail about her cleaning it up, and I
just
don't
like roast,
really
like spit.
Yeah, why did we? Okay, sure. And she feels like obligated to go check up on this kid at the nurses, and I'm just like, why? Like,
Yeah, he's a
honestly,
jerk. He's
this
a bad
is why
boy.
I'm not a teacher, is because you're a jerk to me. I have stopped caring about you.
Yeah,
like,
this has some real like trying to avoid legal liability stuff to it, I think.
And this sort of establishes a weird like rep that she gets, because everybody puts it down to her, like she caused this to happen. Eventually she comes into power, but it is not here. And there was a part of me that sort of wondered initially when I was first reading it if she was making this happen. And then I remembered Sophie and I was like, oh, right. No, it's her doing it.
Yeah, Annie is the one who was like, no, let's not kill the spit spider.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean,
It is a thing
that probably, casts some suspicion on her.
I think,
among
well,
the
but I think
teenagers,
looking
but-
back on it later in the book, it does basically say that it was her, right? Like, my experience of reading the book was that it was Sophie, but I think
both here and in the later like restaurant scene, which is super gross, which we can talk about in
Yeah.
as much or as little detail as
we
everybody
will.
wants
Yeah,
to.
of course.
It's implied that Sophie is pulling the strings, but Sophie says that she isn't. And I think later in the book, Craig, you're right that it is clear that it was coming from Annie all along, but also Sophie just like lies or doesn't tell the whole truth so often that I was not immediately inclined to believe her when she said, "Oh, I have
The
no idea
spider
what
she
you're
actually
talking
straight
about."
up cops to.
Oh, does she?
Yeah,
Okay.
she says like that I can be vindictive, and was it really terrible? And is like asking her about it, and it's clear that the way that Annie is freaked out, she thought she was doing something helpful. And was like, but isn't he a jerk? And Annie's like, I mean, yeah, that does not mean this is what I want. So they have more of like, it seems much more clear then that it is Sophie doing it. But then when she keeps saying Sophie at the restaurant scene, when she's in the stall, I really thought this isn't her. She's not answering her. Kind of jumping ahead here. But really, there's a lot of like just small town life, getting to know Sophie, and lots of amazing meals, amazing hangouts. And I was a little like, I don't know if you guys, what you were expecting when Sophie first invites her over, what her home was going to be like. But I was really picturing something much more practical magic, Victorian house that's got a kind of cozy vibe.
Yep.
And instead,
Not a palatial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about what she was doing with that. And I think really all it is that Rachel Harrison's trying to do, this woman does what we would consider too much for one person all the time. Everything that she does for herself is something we would do for company, for family, for a gathering of people. And for her, that's not necessary. So I'm thinking this house does not sound like a place I want to live and doesn't sound inviting. It's too big, it's too echoing, and it's too spooky. But there's something about who Sophie is and how this house is too much for one person, which makes it exactly right for Sophie.
Sure. Sure.
You know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
And it even like later after, well, I don't want to get all the way to the end after Annie has like made her
Sure.
transformation, but there is it does suddenly open up a lot of different possibilities for what Annie can be doing, like with her own meal making and her own living situation. And yeah, anyway, we can come back to
the
it,
thing you
but-
mentioned about okay, Annie and Sophie start hanging out, and there's one of their hangouts at Annie's place where Sophie is like, I'm a witch, be my friend. And like spiders are pouring out of her clothes. And Annie's like, that seems cool to me. Let's do this. And
Yeah,
I
let's
mean,
be friends.
She does say, what the fuck a bunch, but she's also like, cool, spider friends.
She does say cool spider friends, but there are multiple points where she's like, I am just saying yes to like continue this interaction along because I don't want to
Yeah.
be stuck here. Like,
That's true. I do think that like it's maybe just the way the book is structured, or it's the inherent passivity of Annie. I've been kind of resisting. I'll just do it right now. Kind of reminds me of how some people don't like Hamlet, because why doesn't he just kill the guy at the beginning of the play? It's a whole play about inaction. And I do think that maybe this is a play about a book about of passive character and how frustrating that can be. I'm not trying to say that Harrison's writing Hamlet, but it's just a reference that my brain pulled. Anyway, there's ghosts in that too, like there are ghosts in this book. Anyway,
Any spiders?
No, but
I feel
they
like you could
reference
wrap those
they
into
reference
things pretty easily.
They reference like a snake in the one play, or there's like venom that goes in somebody's ear. It's like a whole thing. The thing you were talking about, Natasha, where like they hang out a bunch, they make a bunch of food, they watch movies. She introduces this woman who is not up on technology to Netflix. There is a moment. Okay,
She loves Netflix.
She
Like,
does
she doesn't
love
like
Netflix.
phones, but she is like, actually, Netflix is pretty cool.
She's like,
Yeah.
I don't have a like a mobile phone. And there is a great moment where Annie's like, yeah, she's like never even handled an iPhone. And it's like, there's something, I got this from the Blank Check pod where they talk about actors who shouldn't be in period drama because you can see that they've seen an iPhone like in their face. And Annie's response to Sophie is that like, she has like reversed that. Like she could never interact with an iPhone. It would be weird.
Yeah.
I just like, I don't get how you live for like hundreds and hundreds of years and you have all that time to fill, like to the point where you don't even remember what day your birthday is anymore. And this is the woman who's like introducing you to television for the first
That is strange.
Like, I think the first thing I would do would just be like, all right, I'm starting at the number 1 and I'm working my way down to the letter Z. I'm going to watch every single TV show that's ever existed.
Yeah.
I really think that like there are times where I get like this with like vampire fic as well, where vampires like, you know, they don't want to adopt certain technologies or get to, and a part of me is just like, what are you kidding me? Of like, why would you not? And then I remember my difficulties with like figuring out what new music is out there. And how
Sure.
utterly resistant I am to watching a new show that's been suggested versus just rewatching King of the Hill again.
Yeah.
And I start to be like, okay, I could see actually getting pretty set in your ways. And if that goes on for long enough, it's harder to get out of it, that rut. And just being like, it's passed me by so completely now, it would take way too long to catch up.
I've been alive.
I'm not interested.
I've been
I mean,
alive
it's
for
also
hundreds
possible
of years. Tin Pan Alley rags are the best I can do.
I mean, it's like how everybody on Star Trek is always listening to like 19th century,
Yep.
like, like string music or whatever. But I mean, you never get to this conversation, but in my head canon, maybe Sophie is just like, I don't like that 5G. I've heard bad things about it. I think it can give you cancer, and I'm trying to live forever out here. I do not like cell phone.
This is well, she says something at one point about how she doesn't own a television, but then she smirks and is like, "I use a projector," and I kind
Yeah,
of like
that's
that
kinda
because
fun.
for a second she's like, "I'm above all that," and then I just use different technology for the
So,
same
like,
thing.
What I was building towards was what was frustrating about Annie is that she never asks like enough. For me, I think you said this kind of earlier, Andrew. Is like it does strain credulity a little bit for me that she never asks more questions about Sophie's whole witch deal. Like literally, the woman is like making fire dance in front of her, and Annie never asks like, "How does that work?" or when exactly were you born? Like the book is really quick to be like, we made a bunch of pizza and watched Real Housewives, and she thinks it's funny that the royals are not like violent now, and it's like, okay, and
It's so extreme in avoiding that I just assumed that Sophie was like, she was under some kind of a spell or something. Like there's no way that somebody can be this
interesting.
passive without being like under some, because so many of the people in the town are responding weirdly to Sophie too. And so I'm like, there must be some kind of other shoe that's going to drop with her relationship to Sophie where the power imbalance like becomes clear to Annie and suddenly she sees clearly. But like, no, that is true, but it's all coming from inside Annie instead of outside.
it's more
from
what Natasha
Sophie.
was saying of like, it's just somebody who wants to be in this friendship so
Yeah.
bad that she's willing to not. She doesn't even think to ask.
Which
further
is
questions.
again like a really interesting twist. It just takes a little bit too long to get there.
Yeah.
We have a real habit of like covering books together that need editors. Like this just happens a lot. I'm realizing looking back.
Even in the books where the first third of them is not like all complaining about editors, like that Stephen King book that we read.
We'll never forget about that.
But it is sort of, it's always hanging around back there, huh? Isn't it?
yeah.
The thing that I was like, I expected this to go in more of a direction, and it doesn't, which a part of me is almost grateful for because it could have gotten a lot uglier, is the reaction of the townsfolk to the friendship between Annie and Sophie. And most of them seem pretty much cool with it, even though they're clearly afraid of Sophie. They're just like, this is the trade-off for living in a tiny little secret paradise, and what are you going to do, you know?
Yeah.
And there's the one man who owns the good mug, Oscar. And he is so bitter because it turns out he was
Just
a guy...
just like his coffee.
He's a coffee artist, my friend. Man is making beautiful lattes.
But he, there's a sense of he was a real Sam and did not appreciate or help his wife. There's a mention where when this gets brought up to Sophie, she describes her as overwhelmed is the word she uses to describe Helen, Oscar's wife, who ran off. And the division of labor in households is a really unequal thing, like traditionally, most of the time. And I don't have children, and I'm just going to put you two gents on the spot right now.
Sure.
Do housework, please, for the love of God. Oh my Lord. It is something that was like a big catalyst in my divorce, and I didn't have the language for it at the time, that like labor expectation, especially I was also working full time, and yet it was expected that I do a lot more, and I didn't really stop and like do the calculations and kind of go, what's that about? And so I just read into the simple line of she was overwhelmed, of Oscar expecting her to carry the household, and then she vanishes and leaves him with this load of labor that he never really comprehended until she was not there to do it. And so there's a bitterness surrounding him thinking that Sophie did something to her, but I believe that in his heart he knows she didn't. I think he's perfectly aware. And then eventually it turns out that like Helen resurfaces and gets in contact with her son and is fine. But Oscar never relinquishes that grudge that he holds. And so when Sophie begins to befriend Annie, and he starts to see the way that Annie is, at one point, she's got a little bit of an attitude with him because he's telling her that she shouldn't hang out with Sophie. And she just makes her cup float over to herself. And she eventually overhears him trying to convince everybody else that Sophie is like corrupting her. And I'm like, what is it that you're suggesting exactly, Oscar? Nobody asks that question. Like, what do you want to do then? One person says, like, most of them are pretty much, I think Annie's nice, it's fine. One person says, I could deal with the bitch, but not two of them. And again, I'm just like, what do you mean, though?
This is you're referencing a thing that Annie hears later in the book. So this is after she has. We should go back and talk about the double date she goes on.
Just the Outback Steakhouse,
but it's after
incident
that,
or whatever it
is
is.
after she has had a conversation with Sam on the phone, because she also found out that Sam was seeing someone. And so then Sophie gave her some like tea that like wigged her out and basically awoke her magic powers, and she's kind of flipping out a little bit and not really sure where she fits into the town. And she hears the townspeople, like she goes to go get some more liquor and nobody's there, and there's like the couple of characters we've ever met are like huddled in a house next door.
Everybody's talking
them.
about her, and it's bad, which is basically like an anxious person's literal worst nightmare.
Yes, yep.
It's like, oh, all the voices in my head are right. Actually, everybody is always looking at me and noticing every bad thing that I notice about myself.
And you're right. This was something that like I saw crop up in a couple of reviews of this book. Some of them were 3-star Goodreads reviews.
We added a guitar.
Oh, okay, nice.
3-star Goodreads reviews. Okay.
Where folks did feel like the whole townspeople plot was just fizzled out. Like I kind of agree with that in the book, just in the sense that like there's enough pages spent kind of establishing this awkward relationship between Sophie and these folks, and the only person that you really get any sense of is with Oscar at the coffee shop, and like the only other version you get is this kind of conversation that's way more centered on Annie than it is on Sophie. So like when you get around to the end of the book, when like things are as good as they're going to get for any of our characters, and it's like the townspeople are like, yeah, we got a couple witches in town. Like, okay,
yeah. Like I feel like if you wanted to make the book longer and spend less time sort of going in the same emotional circles with Annie that we have to go into, I feel like expanding a little on the townspeople is an easy avenue to go down. And so there are a couple of interviews with Harrison that I read. I think here's a quote I think is interesting. And as I got older, I started to wonder what's wrong with a witch who lives in the woods and is fine being by herself. Why do we assume she eats children? Why do we vilify a woman who just wants to do her own thing? I wanted to explore the archetype of the witch. Why was it created and why is she scary? I almost like what I wanted. I think there is a slightly more interesting version of the book that almost has Annie act as a sort of glue between Sophie, who's like this aloof, sort of vaguely terrorizing figure in the society, and the rest of the people who live in the town, where like maybe Annie, through her, like, you know, her outsider's perspective, helps everyone else in the town also see, oh, it is fine that Sophie like lives alone and is a witch, and like there's all this stuff about her. Like, I think there are more explorations of like the core theme of the book, which is basically that like being alone is okay. I think is the like super high level, like blithe summary of it.
But that's in tension with the like, what if we engage with like it? It's fascinating because I think I wanted the same thing, Andrew, but I think it is in tension with, well, what if we engaged in like the community story more? Like I bet Harrison was like, well, I don't know how to square this theme with what if other characters got involved.
I think there's just some meat on both, like maybe give Annie a relationship or two in the town where that she is explicitly rejecting, like to go and be with Sophie and to do like witchy stuff. Or maybe you just have Annie in there as, I'm going to be a witch, and because you all know me in the town, like I can help you have a better relationship with this witch lady too, and maybe like even restore like Sophie's faith in humanity a little bit.
Maybe
even like just I don't know. Like I wanted more social ties in this little small community. So and I don't mind where the book ends up. I just think when I was thinking about, this takes a long time to say the one thing that it's trying to say. Like, it just takes a long time to get there. What else could we have filled that space with? Like, that's my first thought, basically. Yeah. It's just like, there's potential in the rest of the village that is underexplored, I think.
So, question for you, Andrew. You describe Sophie as this terrorizing figure. Mm-hmm. But how so? What does she do?
Everybody seems...
That's a good question.
Really... She does not do anything that we see explicitly on screen. Like, it's all these rumors about how she makes like potions out of bones or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it is clear that everybody in town is really afraid of her. So I guess it's more about like the townspeople's perceptions of Sophie than what Sophie is actually doing. But they're all very like, if we put a toe wrong with this lady, she's going to like turn us into spiders or make our mouths bleed or whatever.
Sure.
And there are like... There are interactions with Annie and Sophie, like especially when they have that big like fight at the end, where it seems like it has been a really long time since anybody has actually like challenged or disagreed with Sophie on anything. And there's a part of her that has a really short fuse about it and like doesn't like it. And so I think maybe that's what I'm sort of reading into the relationship between the townspeople and Sophie. It's not so much anything we see. It's like a combination of stuff we hear and then what we see of like Sophie's personality through Annie, which is that she is often pretty controlling. Like she has a short fuse. Like her emotions will turn on a dime if Annie wants to like bring up a guy or like some kind of thing that Sophie like doesn't approve of or doesn't want to talk about. Like it's that stuff I think that I'm thinking of.
That's fair. I get what you mean, and about inferring because of like just, I mean, she even says her personality, she can be vengeful sometimes.
Yeah.
But I do want to point out that it seems like she really, most of what people are basing their opinions of her on are sheer rumor. And like, I think that's the point as well. The fact that Annie isn't making an effort to like bridge the gap. The reason is because Sophie doesn't care.
Yeah,
that's not
fair.
like, it's not about them for her. She's living her life the way she wants to live. And even though it's frustrating that everybody has a problem with her, and she admits, I don't get it. I'm giving, I'm generous. I do what I make this like tiny little town into this little paradise by creating really good crops for everybody and turning it, and everybody still seems to hate me. And there's, I think, just a letting go of what they think of her and being like, you know, I am who I am and I'm not for everybody. So there's no, like, I don't think the attempt at making her connect with them, it's not important to her. That's part of the point, especially when you're dealing with like the characterization of a woman who desperately wants to be liked versus a woman who she's frustrated by the fact that people don't, because she doesn't see why not, but also she isn't going to change who she is in order and pretend. And that, you know, there's a couple of moments later on with Annie where she's thinking about, eventually, I'm jumping ahead, but we're all over the place. So I think
we're all over the place. It's fine. Yeah.
Eventually, Sam reaches out and is implying that he feels he made a mistake and can he come over? And Sophie has been really controlling.
Yeah,
with
this
Annie,
is some
taking
red
her
flag.
phone
Like,
away,
I would not be
like,
friends with this person, with this version of this person.
It's so annoying because like I really get why Sophie is so frustrated. And if I'm in Annie's head and hearing all of this, it's like Sophie, I don't think has a leg to stand on with as frustrated as she gets, because you don't have to hear what we have to hear, Sophie. But apparently it's bad enough that even she's like, oh my God, give it a rest, which there does come a point, even with somebody that you love, that you have to be like, look, you are going to have to beat a different drum because this is not healthy. Like, find somebody to talk to or whatever. So I get where she's coming from, but she makes it so that Sophie, or that Annie, doesn't feel she can talk to her at all about Sam. And that Annie is like hiding in her closet to talk to Sam on the phone because Sophie's spying on her, which is like so
through Ralph
weird and
the
gross.
spider who lives
Ralph
with her
the
now.
little
Adorable
boy,
little spider. So Sam comes over, and Annie is sort of realizing throughout this exchange, it starts off pretty awkward. She has an idea of how it's going to go, and it's not going that way. And as their interaction continues, she begins to step back and look at all of the things she's done for Sam just in the like 20 minutes he's been in her house, that he has not offered to help with, has not appreciated, has not said thank you for. And she's starting to realize, like, actually, I don't know about this. And then he kisses her, and she's not into it. And she realizes that an earlier version of herself would have gone along anyway, even though she's not enjoying it. And there's a line about, I wonder how many women's lives pass this way, just enduring and getting through. And I think that's the fact that people do not like Sophie is almost like that's a major part of what women struggle with, is simply not trying to be likable and not going along. And eventually Annie, like, somebody presents her with a birthday cupcake, and all she says is, I don't want it right now. And she realizes that is huge for her. She never would have like turned that down. And the enduring this like bad kiss and maybe going along with the sex in the hopes that eventually it would become pleasurable for her was something that she would have done. It's so true. I can't count the number of times that I went along with a makeout or sex that I was not really feeling because I was sort of like, I don't want to hurt his feelings and I like him and maybe it's fine. Who knows? Maybe it'll be a good time. Give him a chance. Give him a chance, really. The kiss of death. And I like that by the end of this, Annie is in a similar place where everybody's kind of scared of her.
Yeah.
And she's just like, welp, guess you're scared of me, which I
I
kind of like.
What I think I mentioned this, but I want to make it like crystal clear. I really like where the book ends up. Like once she finally gets to her, I think it is during the scene with Sam, once she finally gets to her like epiphany where she is able to get outside her head a little bit and observe her relationships kind of like neutrally and like evaluate both her relationship with Sophie and her relationship with
Which
Sam.
she has
and,
already
see them
like had
with
a breaking up on and is going to have to
kindle
with
once
Sophie.
she is seeing that with a little more clarity, I like that a lot. It's definitely just the length of time it takes to get to that.
Yeah,
to that
agree.
Well, and the
I was gonna say
townspeople plot.
props to Harrison. Like, there's nothing you can do to make kissing sound less appealing than just like describing the physical mechanics
Oh,
of
yeah.
kissing.
Oh yeah.
She's like, I felt his wet tongue sliding in and out of my mouth, and I was like, "Girl, Christ!"
So I have the quote pulled for when during the fight between Annie and Sophie. This is before Annie sees Sam and like really comes into her powers and like really punishes him in a physical way with her magic and
She
all
really
sorts of
goes
stuff.
quite far. I was like, "Girl,
But the quote from Sophie that stood out to me was, I don't smile when I don't feel like smiling. I don't pretend. I'm entirely honest about who I am. Is that my great offense? Or maybe it's that I live alone in the woods. And what's more damning, that I live in the seclusion of the trees, or that I live alone, or that I'm happy about it all, that I've made these choices, that I have these gifts, and I embrace them. I'm not ashamed of who I am, of what I am. What is it about a woman in full control of herself that is so utterly frightening? Can you tell me, Annie? And like that, I think is like the thesis of the book.
For sure.
I think I have a little bit of like dissatisfaction with where the book lands with them as friends and like the message of just like, well, I don't know. If you're pitching this as a story of female friendship, I think it doesn't quite land because there is this like, it is cool to be on your own and be the empowered version of your solo self. But I feel like the relationship between Annie and Sophie has so much like sometimes toxic, sometimes great, sometimes frustrating back and forth that it is a little messy.
Well, and also like the whole like if you do go back to Sam, if you do decide that being with a guy is something that you really wanted to do and be like, I don't think you should come back because I don't think I can ever respect you again. Like that's a little
yeah.
And I think what I'm talking about the townspeople, Natasha, what I think I want is not for Sophie to change her behavior to like better her relationship with them or whatever. I kind of want the town to come to some degree of the understanding that Annie does and that the reader does, which is like, yeah, what's wrong with me? Like living in a house by myself and just doing what I want. Like maybe have the townspeople become more
Welcome
understanding.
to
Not change anything about what Sophie is. Yeah, society. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's really what, because what you're responding to there, I think is what is the most like powerful stuff about the book, which is just like, I do what I want and I don't care what anybody thinks, period. Like that's the end of it. And that's pretty cool.
And it's
I
like
just found
a really powerful place to come from, but it is so hard. Like I've gotten so much better at it and I am still not awesome. And it's one of those stand in the shower, think about, oh, I should have said, it still happens so often.
I just found it was an interesting tension with the themes of female friendship that were running through the book. Like the self-sufficiency that the book seemed really interested in it caused a blow up between between the two of them, and yet the like thing that we're leaving on is them potentially initiating another person who is one of Annie's former students. And so I'm just like, I would love to know a bit more about what Harrison thinks about like what is their all relationship moving forward, because it is really interested in like a witch is this independent woman who can live on her own, and like that's kind of the goal, and yet they have these connections.
Yeah, I mean, you could even, if again, thinking of other avenues that could have been explored, like explore Helen, Oscar's like ex-wife, as an example of a woman who, like, Sophie helped liberate from a crappy relationship, but who then, instead of just becoming sort of a mirror of Sophie and doing all the stuff that Sophie did, like going off and doing her own thing and finding some kind of empowerment that way, you know, like alternate paths toward the same sort of goal, you know?
Sure.
I kind of wish we had gotten to see some of Helen, that she wasn't just gone,
for
and
sure.
that there was like a presence there where she came into herself and understood the way that she was letting the life be sucked out of her. But she wasn't a witch. It wasn't because of that. I mean, there's a moment where Sophie says that she was drawn to Annie because she sensed that Annie was like her. So that's like, you know, textual, that there's something she could see there. But the idea of just like women, it's like, I don't even know. I understand what you're saying, Craig, about like the self-sufficiency. I feel like it's less, the self-sufficiency is definitely a thing, because she talks a lot about just finding validation within yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
But she also like is very much wanting this relationship with Annie to work, and is so worried a couple of times that she has freaked her out and that she's not going to want to come over anymore. And that's part of what she like lies about there being ghosts in the house, because she doesn't want to overload Annie with too much reality right away. She's like, I just revealed I'm a witch, and I don't think I should add that there are ghosts also. And you know, we know,
like the tragic story of those ghosts, right? Like those are people that she has like dealt with, and now they haunt her. Like that's like the whole thing. Is like they can't. She puts them in the basement because they have to be around, because she had to like either kill them or deal with them or whatever, because they threatened her, and that's like kind of.
But she also says, "I just don't want to let them go. Like I don't want to let them rest. Like there's an element of like a mutual sort of haunting that is going on." I
kind of love that. Just being like, I mean, it would be less of a headache for me, honestly, if I just let them, but that's not happening. Fuck them.
And then these ghosts are the people who like actually threw her down a well to die, and are not just like
and killed her sisters,
being like crappy to her at the coffee shop, which is the worst anybody in the current town does to her.
Yeah.
That's fair.
But I think that it's also a, what if looking toward other women just for the community and not needing them to live with you, not needing them to be part of your everyday life. You can take them on days you want them, and also be perfectly at peace by yourself, and learning that balance, because Annie just had no friends at all.
Do we think that Sophie... Well, I guess what I don't get is that I don't know if Sophie learns that lesson here, because I do think that Sophie needs to learn that a little bit. Like in the way that she is so domineering of Annie in the middle of the book, in a way that I think Harrison is like, this is a flawed person who is also working through stuff in this relationship.
I think we're meant to get a hint of that with the like, don't call me pet interaction.
And she's like,
but
yeah.
Oh, you're right that there's no like full reckoning.
Which is like,
I don't think.
it's okay.
Yeah.
The author doesn't need to give me everything. That's fine.
Yeah.
And also, I just see so much. There was a time where I had just turned 30, just initiated my divorce, and I got like one of those like quick, easy, tide me over kind of jobs at this sandwich place. And I was a supervisor, and all the people working there were women, but they were all at least 10 years younger than me. And it was one of those like incredibly infuriating moments where you keep seeing girls dealing with complete douchebag assholes and making all these excuses for them, and making it like sound like they're demanding too much by just expecting to be treated well, and you just want to slap and shake them. And you like, I really felt for Sophie in that she is domineering. She's way too controlling. She is pushing this friend away and flat out is like, don't come back. If you make your choice, that's it forever.
Yeah.
Which she acknowledges later was like unfair.
Uncool.
But when you've like grown and you can see so clearly how much a person is allowing themselves to be mistreated, it's so hard sometimes to hold on to your empathy and remember that you used to be there too, and that you used to allow, and it's almost like you slip into a victim blaming thing where it's like, you're letting this happen. Do you not see it? But they aren't seeing it because they've been taught this is what's to be expected in relationships. And this is normal. I mean, there's like, you know, decades of toxic examples in movies and television of relationships that we pretended were like gold standard for romance that are full of just terrible precedents for things now so I just felt for Sophie a lot more on the read through of just being like, man, keeping your mouth shut is what a good friend would do. But it's when you are hearing it over and over, oh, what Sam would be like this is how Sam would react. Me and Sam used to do, you just want to be like, low key, nobody gives a shit. Sam no longer even gives a shit. Can you just let it go? So it's like Sophie gives way to all of the worst impulses that you have when you're an older person hearing a younger person. It's like that's a fair overbearing parent, you know?
Yeah. So as we maybe come to roost on this conversation, one thing we haven't really talked about that much is whether or not this book is like spooky. And I mentioned cozy horror up top. So I think we've talked about wanting to talk about the double date. So Andrew,
oh my God, we keep saying we're going to do that, and then
I think this is like a good instructive moment to get at like what is and isn't spooky about this book. Because as we said, like it was kind of marketed as this horror thriller. I think it's actually way more interesting as like a growing up story for a woman in her, you know, who just turned 30, more than it is a like, what if witches did stuff in a small town? So Andrew, like just give us a high level summary of the double date that Annie goes on and how it ends.
So there's another before I do the thing that you just literally just asked me to do. There's another quote from that Big Thrill interview that I think gets to the book's take on spookiness and like Harrison's take on spookiness. She says, because I'm someone who has an anxious personality, dread is really what gets me and makes me feel afraid. Louder slasher horror, that stuff scares me too, but it doesn't get under my skin the way dread does. I think there's some pretty powerful moments of dread in Cackle, and I did want to build a sense of dread and have readers not know where it's going. For anybody who's a type A planer like me, not knowing where something ends up is terrifying.
Yeah.
And I think when you get to the horror of the book, a lot of it is, and this is where the book's like sort of beating around the bush works for it, I think, is like, yeah, it's clear something is up with Sophie. It's clear that like something creepy is going to happen to these kids who are terrorizing Annie. It's clear that this like double date is going to end up some way. And part of the horror of it, such as it is just like, when are we going to get there? What's going to happen? Oh, yeah. I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
So they go to one of the, I think it's like one of the administrators.
It's the vice principal of the school, whom she meets when she's checking up on the kid who puked up the spider.
Yes. And so she says, hey, do you want to come with me and my normie husband to this
normiest,
like this like German beer bar, like Applebee's thing in town, and you can meet this guy who is my husband's friend or whatever, and I think you'll really hit it off. Like, why don't I play matchmaker for you? And so they go, and it's immediately clear that nobody's going to have a good time. Mm-hmm. And it's also clear that I remember Jill being the name of the administrator. Yep. I don't remember the name of her husband.
Dan.
Is it Tom or Dan? It's like some short man
name. He has great views of Home Depot and dim views of women. That is how we understand Dan.
And the date is Pascal.
Yeah.
I just feel like the ideal archetype of masculinity for me is somebody who has good views of women and good views of Home Depot.
Yep.
Like, that's how I try to live my life. But he is just making every little passive aggressive and increasingly like aggressive comment about what Annie is eating and how she looks and how she's behaving and how she's treating their friend. And Annie just gets like fed up with it. And then what happens? Somebody.
I just want to mention that I know it's like part of the thing is how controlling it is to be like, you're really getting a chicken Caesar salad at this like beer garden restaurant. But I was also sort of like, really, Annie, that's what you're getting? Because it's just not here. Like, you're just setting yourself up for a bad salad. You have to know that, which it is. And that's sort of her own fault. But
the worst food poisoning I ever got is a Pizza Hut salad that I decided I was going to eat at a work thing because I wanted to be like a good, healthy boy.
Sometimes health doesn't pay. It's just,
just have
places
the gross,
have
like,
their strengths and you've got to acknowledge that and go with it.
Yeah.
So, and she's like, just get salad. Dan, I kept thinking that it was Pascal who was like making comments, but the fact that it's Jill's husband and she keeps giggling and sort of egging him on in a way.
For real.
I loved that detail because Jill is so many women that he even mentions how he used to date her friend, but then he like traded up
He
for
leveled
a better
up or
model.
whatever. Yeah.
And I like Annie is in the middle of drinking and sort of like gasps in horror and chokes on her drink before she realizes Jill's laughing and thinks it's really cute and is like, okay, I guess I'm the only one who thought that was horrifically offensive. And there is nothing like this, especially like if you are in an echo chamber, which I am, and I will never apologize for in my life, of great people who have like views that you can agree with on things. When you suddenly get exposed to folks who are not in that place at all, and they genuinely think something is cute that you think is a low-key horror show. I really love the detail that Jill is almost like there's a sort of reprimand in her voice when she's talking to Annie. And like, why aren't you carrying this conversation? Why aren't you contributing more of yourself? And it's like, well, because this other dude is making zero effort at all. Why does she have to do everything?
It was kind of amazing that no shoe dropped with Pascal. Like,
Right?
literally, he is a non-entity. And the book has a dim view of men, which is, I don't think any of the men in this book are like particularly treated unfairly. They seem, mostly pretty bad. And it's like, it's interesting the different types of bad guys that she trots out. And one of them is the Pascal who is like, I don't know. I don't like this lady. Maybe if she wants to sleep with me, I guess we'll talk about it later. But like, I'm just here to drink a whiskey and like watch this guy that I'm friends with be a jerk to her.
I believe Annie describes Pascal's personality later as a ventriloquist dummy without the ventriloquist, which I thought was very evocative. Like there are little analogies here and there that Harrison throws in that I think are really well done.
And I haven't done a lot of dating myself, but I hear from a lot of women that it's a real litmus test to see how many questions a man asks you about yourself versus how much he just talks about himself. And that's like part of the thing. He doesn't stand to introduce himself when she arrives at the restaurant. He doesn't ask her anything. It's the same as Sam with putting no effort in of his own, expecting her to do everything. And then Dan is a really good example of no matter what you do as a woman, it's wrong. So, if she were fat, he would probably be making comments on what she ordered, but she's too skinny. So he's making comments on what she orders in that direction, even insinuating that she's going to go barf it up. Just on nothing but the fact that she's very thin. And it's just like progressively the fact that she isn't playing nice the way he thinks she should throughout the night, it seems like to be really getting to him and making him grow more and more aggressive for no reason. It's just simply that she's not engaging and being cute like his wife. Yeah. And just, it doesn't take very much to suddenly have people up in their feelings and their opinions about you. They will literally assume anything with no information because that's just what they do in their free time. It's just create stories about you. But eventually.
So she goes to the bathroom to get
away.
away.
I get so frustrating with like the exact type of guy he is, like the the guy wearing the no fat chicks shirt that's like, I like a girl who can eat.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Ugh. But anyway, we're gonna get to the bones. We're gonna get down to the bones of the matter.
So she goes to the bathroom. She sees some writing in the stall, typical, and then she sees some writing in the wall that's kind of magical. She assumes it's Sophie. I think we find out later that like that may or may not be true. Sophie doesn't seem to really know what any of this was. It's just like her power calling to her, basically.
I love it. The note says, "This is your night. Take it back. Give him hell." And she goes very literal.
She goes back and he starts puking up bones out of his mouth.
Yeah. and blood and
Initially, it's
stuff.
like there's just a bone in his sausage, and he's just sort of like, that's weird. And then they start to get like bigger and like they shouldn't fit inside his mouth.
Yeah.
And then he starts like bleeding from his mouth. And Annie is just losing her shit laughing, which is, that was the creepiest part to me, is like, I understand wanting to get back at somebody who has been a total dick to you all night. But I draw the line at laughing at them bleeding at the table. Like, I feel like once you've got blood pouring out of somebody's mouth, I'm satisfied. I don't need any more. And that she's like chortling to the point that other tables are going quiet and turning and looking at her like, what's happening? And of course, Jill does the I need to speak to a manager bit. The whole thing is just so incredibly uncomfortable. And there was such a sense of satisfaction, though. I really like, Dan is so awful.
How do we all
I mean,
feel?
I've seen the book described as like there are elements of like revenge fantasy to it, and it's that is like a big, like this scene is the one big thing, and then the thing with Sam where he's like laying on the floor like bleeding out of his eyes is like,
Yeah.
some guy can dump you and you don't have to be sad about it. You can just go move to upstate New York and be a cool witch who terrifies everybody.
Yep.
Like that, this too can happen to you. But anyway, Craig, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, like, how did we as a group kind of just feel about the quality of the writing in these sections, the quality of the, you know, or the gore, whatever you want to call it, because like I do think I read an article in the Mary Sue about like cozy horror stuff, and just like another article on nightmare-magazine.com that name checked like Goosebumps as a like touchstone for horror that you can like feel good while you're reading and engaging with, and it's mostly playing in the aesthetics of that genre, and it's not this like endurance test of how much scary you can take. It's more about like, I don't know, you can live in it, you can have a latte and then a man can puke bones. Like, I don't know, how did we all kind of respond to that whole vibe?
I think that was what I really liked about the book, is that it does go from like wildly comfy, like food porn, and then goes to this terrible man is getting like, she's wreaking havoc on him. And I was like, honestly, this is where I want to live, where bad men have bad things happen and I eat pie. Sounds good. That's all I want.
Yeah, I think that stuff will stick with me about this book, and also just the way you expect this book to go is Normie Annie moves to this town. She gets involved with this witch lady, and eventually she realizes the witch lady is a witch lady and is like, I'm just a normal person. I need to escape from this horror that's been imposed upon me. And that's happened in like
Plenty of other books.
like Mexican Gothic's the one for our show that I always go back to, like a book that just lives in my head literally all the time. Is like, it's the arc that this kind of story usually follows. Is you move somewhere, it's a little unsettling, you uncover what the core unsettling horror is, and then you either die or you like escape to live another day. And the thing I like the most about this is that it ends with Annie being like, yeah, I'm gonna like give into the quote horror of the situation. I'm going to become a monster, and it's going to be awesome. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say too that it's funny because the thing that creeped me out the most while reading is not something that either of you has mentioned, and it's sort of like probably because it's a little rooted in reality. But the part that I got the most spooked reading is when she first arrives at the apartment and she hears somebody and goes
that
outside.
part sucks.
Yeah,
That part blows.
I
Oh,
really
man.
got so freaked out, and I was sort of like expecting more of that kind of like, is there someone in my house kind of energy? And that's like almost the only time it happens. There's a sense of Sophie watching her, but it never feels like she is there. And that part, especially, there's like a description of the outside stairs turning a corner and really feeling like she sees a shadow that does not match up with her shadow. And I was just like really freaked out because I was also listening the first time alone in my house at night. Not recommended. So I think that she does a really good job as a writer of building dread. I just think that there are times where you can cut things and make it more tight, and that builds the tension a little bit more. You know,
I think it's if you read all the interviews that Harrison has done around this, it's clear that like there's a lot of her in Annie, and so it's like I don't
About
know
like
what my
female
point
friendships
is.
throughout her life and stuff.
Well, not just female friendships throughout her life, but like she is anxious and Annie is anxious, and it sounds like being in Annie's head during the deepest like the pits of self-doubt that Annie digs herself down into. Like it sounds like it's maybe a lot like what it's like to be in Harrison's head when she's having those like similar feelings. So maybe it was just like difficult to cut that stuff because it felt like more personal to her or something. I'm not sure. I don't want to like I don't want to what's the
Like
word?
diagnose?
I don't want to cast aspersions or whatever. But like that's a possible explanation, I guess.
Well,
For a book that it otherwise is like pretty tight and interesting. Like to have this be the part about it that's not interesting. Like just maybe that's one explanation.
The fun thing I think about the horror in the book, and so like one of the things I got from that Mary Sue article, which is trying to remember, instead of arguing about this horror genre, why not curl up and enjoy it? Talks about it like when you have horror, you can have all the spooky elements, but if you know, for example, you're going to have a happy ending or low stakes, or even if the stakes are big, it's surrounded by humor or love interest or things that kind of negate those big stakes. Like that is kind of the appeal of this type of book. So you get a thing where she makes a man, unbeknownst to her own self, puke bones out of his face and like bleed all over the place. And then she dances on her car in front of her house and sings a song. And when you hate someone you meet, they will get a tasty treat, bones on their tongue and in their cheeks, bones to make them hush and make them bleed. Bones are the escape you need. You can sing and dance alone, all thanks to the bones. And you're like, she wrote a funny little bone song for her main character to sing after she made a man's puke bones.
Craig, those are the words to the theme song for the show Bones. I don't know.
Oh,
how you not know
really?
this.
I've
No,
only
it's
ever
not.
heard the instrumental.
No, the Bones theme song is just an instrumental. I'm just goofing with you.
What if you did sing the Bones theme song with these words, though?
That would be.
That
That
would
would
I feel like you'd be
weird.
casting
That would
a
be
spell.
a weird. There's no Patreon tier high enough for me to do
Sure,
that.
fair enough.
But
Yeah, this book is like, it's fun. Like the book is like interested in having fun. Some of it is in the cozy town interactions. Some of it is in the bone stuff. And it creates a space where you don't have to be as scared of the witchy stuff because that's not really what it's into.
Yeah. Some of the horror is simply that she seems to be subsisting on solely tortilla chips and scrambled eggs
And-
at the
and
beginning
liquor.
of the story.
Yeah.
Some of the contents of her grocery carts, it was genuinely me going, "Oh, girl, oh,
yeah,
honey."
you gotta treat yourself better than this.
It's not even girl dinner. It's not even. Well, Natasha, thanks for bringing us this book.
Yeah,
I had
thank
a
you
fun
guys
time
for
reading
reading
it.
it.
Yeah.
Just want to spread it around. If you're home alone, go make yourself a full roast chicken and have a bottle of wine and cook a chocolate fudge cake just for you.
And yeah,
do
eat
it.
an entire chocolate cake like in the movie Matilda.
Yeah.
Or the book Matilda.
Well,
Yeah.
hopefully not like that, but like that a little.
Yeah. mhm.
Wearing a boa
The
or
cake,
something.
the same cake, but not the same situation.
Exactly.
Unless you're into that. Anyway.
I'm painting holding a picture, and Andrew had to come and puke chocolate cake all over it.
I won't talk anymore. I'm done.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. This was really fun.
This was really fun.
All right, folks. Well, until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
She held me spellbound in the night, dancing shadows and firelight, crazy laughter in another room, and she drove herself to madness with a silver spoon. Ooh, witchy woman, see how high she flies.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.